Hey bakers, welcome back to another episode of Bake It Better with Kai. And today we're going to talk about something that doesn't require flour or the oven, but it still definitely falls into the realm of baking. It's homemade ice cream. And it starts with your basic custard making skills, which is important for other desserts too. So we're still calling it baking for this purpose. The best part of this video is that I'm going to show you how to make it without an ice cream maker, two different options. And we'll also look at two different styles of ice cream and of course two classic flavors, chocolate and vanilla. So we'll get started with our custard style ice cream, which has eggs in it and cream. It's really rich and luxurious, which we'll flavor that with a classic vanilla bean flavor, and that starts on the stove. So let's start with our vanilla bean. So the first style of ice cream we're going to make is that really rich custard style ice cream. And this gets its richness from both heavy cream as well as egg yolks. So if you like a Ben & Jerry style ice cream or really like Haagen-Dazs, like a creamy ice cream, this is the recipe that you should try. The recipe that I'm using today is called vanilla bean ice cream on our website, and you can check it out. So first we start by measuring out 2 cups or 454 grams of both heavy cream and milk. You could use half and half instead, but I like using a combination of heavy cream and milk. So we're adding both of these to a pot on the stove or an induction burner. And then what we'll do is we'll let it come to a boil. Then we'll add our vanilla bean paste, which is really the ingredient that makes this ice cream come to life. If you just have regular vanilla extract, that's totally fine. You can use it too. The benefit of using paste, if you can find it, is it has the flecks of real vanilla bean in it, which gives it that classic vanilla ice cream look and flavor. You want to add your flavoring after this comes off the heat because vanilla extract is alcohol based, it tends to burn off if you add it and then you cook it. So make sure you add your vanilla extract after the heat. So I'm going to let this come to a boil, and while I do that, I'm going to separate 4 eggs into the whites and the yolks. We'll be using the yolks, but save those egg whites to make meringues or some other lovely souffle-like dessert. And once this boils, we will come back. So now our cream and our milk has come to a boil and we're letting it cool. It's time to add the liquid gold, the vanilla bean paste. The recipe calls for about a tablespoon, and I'm a precise baker. I usually always measure, but I don't want to waste a drop on the tablespoon. So I'm just going to eyeball about a tablespoon here. Oh, that looks so good. And so you'll see it go from this kind of creamy white to a gorgeous flecked color, and I can start to smell the vanilla bean. It's becoming really aromatic and delicious smelling. So we'll let that cool, and I've cracked and separated the 4 egg yolks here. To the egg yolks, we're adding about 9 grams or half a cup of sugar. I added 2 tablespoons of brown sugar along with the white just to add a little bit more depth of flavor there. So feel free to make a combo if you want. If you know you prefer sweeter ice cream, like an American style, you might want to increase this to about 2/3 a cup. Make sure as soon as you add your sugar to your egg yolks, you start stirring them. Otherwise, a weird reaction happens where the sugar starts to cook the yolks. It basically draws the water out of the yolks and you can get these really hard chunks. So make sure you start moving this, and you want to beat the yolks with the sugar until they're pretty light and fluffy. They'll become almost like a lemon yellow color. At this point, you also want to add the second secret ingredient, if you have it, xanthan gum. This is an ingredient that is often used in gluten-free baking. You can find it on our website or in specialty food stores. And what this does is it makes your ice cream super creamy. So it's not necessary, you can skip it, but since we're not using an ice cream maker, it will definitely help make up that difference and make sure that the final texture is super creamy and not icy. So if you don't want to buy an ice cream maker, you can definitely get similar effects with just buying one of these. So consider adding it to your pantry if you are a homemade ice cream connoisseur. So we've got this, it looks nice and kind of lemon yellow and ribbony. You could beat it in your mixer if you wanted to, but I want a little arm workout here. So it looks nice. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to temper our egg yolks. So back to another basic fundamental baking skill that you've got to master if you're going to be a great baker. So we want to slowly add this hot milk mixture to our egg yolks and mix it, slowly raising the temperature of the eggs so that they don't cook. Once they're nice and hot but not cooked, we'll add it back to this pot on the stove and cook it a little bit more. So we'll start, this is where you can practice being ambidextrous, and try stirring as you add the yolks to get this moving so that you don't cook it too much. If you're a little bit nervous about tempering, if it's your first time, you might want to let this cool a bit more so that you have less of a risk of cooking your yolks. Otherwise, just give it a try. You can ask a friend to help stir. So I'm going to add one more ladleful. Whoops, that happens. It's okay. You're cooking at home. It happens. So all of those dry ingredients were in here. They're now mixed with the eggs. This is nice and hot. We've got our cream and our milk and our vanilla, and we're ready to go back on the stove. So you want to keep mixing as you add this in here, again, just further tempering. And then what we'll do is we'll cook this mixture. This is now our custard base. We're going to cook this whole thing until it starts to get thick. It should look like the consistency of heavy cream. It should be about 170 to 180 degrees if you test it with an instant thermometer. If you don't have one, it should coat the back of a spoon. So I'm going to cook this, and we'll come back when it's properly thickened to show you what it looks like. This is what the custard base should look like when it's thickened and ready to come off the stove. It looks thicker than when we started, and when I take the temperature, it is 175 degrees. That's perfect. If you don't have this, you can use a spatula or a spoon, and using your very clean finger, it should hold that streak and not just fill right back in. So now we're gonna set this aside, let it cool to room temperature while we mix up our chocolate ice cream base, and then I'll show you the two different ways to make this super creamy and smooth without an ice cream maker. Okay, on to our second style of ice cream, which is going to be chocolate flavored. So this is more of a simple, traditional ice cream base. It doesn't have any eggs or cream in it. It's a little bit faster if you're looking for a quick project with the kids and you don't want to go through the fuss of cracking eggs. So you're going to add to your pot about a cup of sugar, 198 grams. There's some salt in there too. This recipe is called Chocolate Decadence Ice Cream, and you can get the full recipe and amounts there. This was some cocoa powder and cornstarch for thickening. The cocoa powder that I'm using is a Dutch processed cocoa powder, which means the acid has been stripped from it, and that just gives you a smoother, more well-rounded chocolate flavor profile. I'm adding espresso powder to my ice cream, which won't make this taste too mocha-like, but instead it'll just make the chocolate have a really robust, delicious flavor. So whisk all of those things together in your pot, and then once it's combined, you're gonna add 1 cup of milk and then, 1 cup of water and 2 cups of milk. I prefer using whole milk whenever I'm making ice cream because you get a really delicious, creamy flavor, the higher the fat content. If all you have is skim milk, you might want to use 3 cups of skim milk instead of the whole milk plus the water, but definitely don't let your kind of milk prevent you from making this ice cream. So now all we have to do is heat this up till it comes to a boil to let the sugar dissolve and the cornstarch thicken, and then we'll let it cool. I'll show you what it looks like once it's cool. So our chocolate ice cream base has come to a boil, so the cornstarch has activated and has thickened it nicely. And at this point, we're going to add about a cup of chopped chocolate, or I'm using chocolate wafers, which melt really nicely. And just let that sit for a minute so it can melt the chocolate. When this is cooking, make sure that you scrape the bottom with a spatula or your whisk, otherwise it will burn. Don't burn it, the flavor will come through. So one other secret recipe or secret ingredient that can help make your ice cream super creamy, especially if you're not using an ice cream maker, is alcohol. And alcohol doesn't freeze solid, and so when you mix it into your ice cream, it will keep it really smooth and more like a soft serve consistency rather than freezing like a solid brick like ice would. So vodka has no flavor really, So if you add that to your base, it's really just a neutral flavor profile. But if you like coffee flavored, you could add a coffee liqueur or an amaretto, or you could use that to elevate the flavor, or you could just use it as a textural ingredient. So I'm gonna add a 1/4 cup here and mix it all in. And then what we're going to do is let this cool to room temperature. Once it's room temperature, put it in your freezer safe container, and you're going to put it into the freezer. And every 30 minutes or so, we're going to stir it to keep it a nice smooth consistency, and then put it back in the freezer for a total of 2 to 3 hours until it's the consistency that you like. And stirring it every 30 minutes breaks down any ice crystals and just keeps that texture super smooth. So once this is cool, we'll add it in, and then I'll show you what it looks like every 30 minutes until it really comes into itself. All right, team, our vanilla custard has cooled to room temperature, and so I transferred it from the bowl into 2 zip top bags, just double lined it for extra insurance, and squeezed out all of the air. In another bag, I've got about 4 cups of crushed ice, and to that you're gonna add 4 tablespoons or a 1/4 cup of the coarsest salt you can find, and the salt will help lower the freezing point of the ice. There's actually such a thing as ice cream salt. If you can find it, you're welcome to use it, but otherwise you could just use a coarse kosher salt, and you don't need to be exact here. It's just to get a good amount of salt in there. So then you just kind of want to shake up the salt and make sure your bag is super tightly sealed, and then add it to the bag of ice. You want to then squeeze out as much of the air as possible and seal it up. You can also put this in a plastic container with a lid. If you have something that snaps shut, you can use your favorite reusable container too. I'm gonna get a little bit more air out. And now comes the fun part. So you want to get a friend, or this is a great project to do with kids, but you're basically going to shake this for 5 to 10 minutes, and it will drop the temperature of the custard and freeze it really quickly. And the quicker your ice cream freezes, the smoother the consistency. So you have some incentive to work hard here. So I'm gonna go ahead and start shaking this. Make sure the ice is as evenly in the bag as possible, so all surfaces of the custard chill. And I'll show you what it looks like when it's done and has a beautiful texture. So wish me luck. So I definitely got my workout in, shaking the bag to try to get the ice cream to harden. I took a break and let my sister shake it for another 5 minutes, and then put it in the freezer and let it harden a little bit. So don't feel like you have to just go on a marathon and shake it until it gets hard. You can definitely pause, take a break, and because you did the hard work of shaking it initially, it will be a really smooth texture, really creamy and not icy at all, because you cooled it down really fast. So once it gets to a soft serve-like consistency, which you can see this is, you can transfer it to a freezer safe bowl and put in the freezer and let it harden the rest of the way until it's the texture that you want. Keep in mind that a larger volume or batch of ice cream will take longer to freeze than a smaller batch. So if you're doing this with kids, you might want to make a half batch, because that smaller volume will freeze a lot faster if there's maybe a little bit of patience running low. Otherwise, make a full batch, invite a few friends to help out, take some breaks every time it starts to get a little bit warm. You can refill your bag with ice and salt if it starts to melt, and pretty soon you'll have homemade ice cream. So I'll show you what this looks like after it's in a bowl and has chilled in the freezer for probably about another hour. So it's been about 30 minutes since our chocolate has been in the freezer. So I'm just gonna give it a stir. I put a layer of plastic wrap over the top to prevent a skin from forming. And so it's definitely getting cold and pretty thick. It now looks like chocolate pudding. So by stirring it, I'm just breaking down any ice crystals that have started to form, ensuring a super smooth texture. So this is the chocolate ice cream after about an hour, and you can see that it's starting to get stiff around the edges. So we'll just scrape down the sides. Ooh, yeah, the bottom is starting to get stiff too. So it's been another 30 minutes or so I'll give our chocolate ice cream a stir to see how it's doing, break down any of the ice crystals that have been forming. It's definitely getting thicker, but it's not quite to ice cream consistency. So we'll put it back in, let it go for a little longer. And don't worry about stirring it exactly every 30 minutes or so. just stir it every so often. You think about it and it will be just fine. Ice cream is not something to stress over, it's a treat. All right, it's been a few hours and our ice cream journey is almost at the end. The vanilla bean ice cream was the one that we mixed in the bag, and it has a nice soft serve-like consistency. Oh, look at that. Around the edges. It's still a little soft in the middle, but I'll just put it in the freezer for another hour or two before serving it. It's almost like the stuff you'd get in a cone at an ice cream stand, and it's not icy at all. Wonderful. The chocolate is a little bit soft as well because we added that vodka. Remember, that was what was going to keep the chocolate creamy, and the xanthan gum is what's keeping the vanilla creamy. And again, around the side, it's thicker. I'm such a chocoholic, I love that. Ooh, could even swirl them together and do like a chocolate and vanilla swirl. So I had so much fun making these. I hope that this would be a fun summer project for you guys to take on at home. It's a great way to advance your baking skills, and it's just a fun activity. It takes some effort and some time, but the rewards are totally worth it. So have fun with your flavors. You can start with just basic chocolate and vanilla and take it to all new levels. And thanks for watching.